Who likes doing burst damage in D&D? Me, I do. Can you still do good burst damage now with the 2024 rules? I think so. And I don't even think you need the Conjure Minor Elementals spell to do it, though we will be building a full spellcaster today, and it is gonna be awesome. Welcome to D4. Hey everybody, so here at D4, every week I take a deep dive into one character build for my favorite role-playing games. I like to crunch numbers about them, I like to theorycraft about them, not so that I can tell you the right way or the best way to play a character, but to explore one potential way to build something in hopes of creating a character that's both really fun, but also really powerful to play. So if you also really enjoy creating characters for your favorite role-playing games, or if you just like theory crafting, or if you're looking for tips or ideas on how to build something that you're thinking about playing, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and I'm so glad you're here. So thank you for watching. My name's Colby. Right, so a few months ago, Chris, Treant Monk, and I did a little 2024 Player's Handbook preview video series. Watch it here. If you haven't seen it, see if our predictions were accurate. In that video, I said that I thought burst damage was seriously going to be nerfed in 2024 compared to 2014. Chris kind of disagreed with me, but after spending a lot more time poring over the rules since then, I think I stand by my initial argument. I think Wizards of the Coast has done three main things to really reduce big burst damage numbers from player characters in 2024. First, by making it so that Action Surge no longer lets you cast another leveled spell. It used to be pretty easy for a lot of casters to grab a couple levels of fighter and then throw out multiple fireballs or big damage dealing spells on their turn and just kind of go nuclear on the battlefield, like I did in, say, the Blaster Wizard build. Now, you can only cast one leveled spell on your turn, and the extra action granted by Action Surge doesn't allow you to take the magic action. Yes, I know there's potentially a loophole here where you find a way to cast a free spell that normally costs a spell slot but doesn't for you because of some species, feature, or feat, etc. I'll probably try and find a fun way to build around that one day, I think. The second big nerf to burst damage, though, comes from the fact that we can only smite once a turn now, as it costs our bonus action to use Divine Smite, right? I have so many builds in my backlog that would dip into Paladin, get themselves a lot of attacks, and then scale our spell slots as quickly as possible so that we could smite a million times and just totally crater an enemy, like, say, in the Lockeden Bard build. The third big Nova nerf in 2024 comes from the Assassin change, where we no longer get a guaranteed critical hit on a surprised enemy. That was another favorite thing of mine to build around, a few levels of Assassin Rogue, and then find a way to make a lot of attacks and or make really hard hitting attacks to just roll a billion dice out of the shadows, like in the Assassin's Creed build. Now, granted, this tactic would only work if an enemy was surprised, which was hard to plan around, and for that reason, I'm not super sad to see this particular one go away in 2024, but these three things combined are definitely going to make it a little tougher to get to those astronomical Nova numbers that we could sometimes get to. Now, for what it's worth, I don't think nerfing burst damage capabilities is necessarily a bad thing. As fun and awesome as blowing a big bad up on the first round of combat can be as a player, it can be frustrating as a DM to have your fight that you've worked hard to compile kind of be over before it really begins when players are doing huge burst damage, right? Or it might make them feel forced to fudge numbers. Let me just double the hit points of that guy really quick. Or suddenly add some reinforcements to the fight that they weren't planning on having. Stuff like that, my opinion, can kind of make combat encounters feel a little inauthentic, I think. Depends on the skill of the DM, I guess. Regardless, it can make encounters a lot more difficult to balance, right? Not only that, but if you bring a character to the table that can just do massive amounts of on-demand burst damage, sometimes it can take the wind out of the sails of other players at your table, I think. If you're kind of just single-handedly all but ending an encounter right on round 1 or maybe 2 because you've eliminated an enemy or two right away, vastly tipping the scales in your party's favor, it might make the rest of the encounter feel like you're just sort of going through the motions. That might be fun once in a while, but I can see it getting old, maybe especially for your other player companions at the table, right? All of that said, sure, there are still ways to do nice Nova damage in 2024. There are even still ways to guarantee critical hits. Will we be able to get up to the same level as old Nova builds? I'm guessing not. Maybe outside of making use of Conjure Minor Elementals. I'll talk more about that later, but part of me really hopes I'm wrong. Regardless, I'm going to do my darndest to still go Nova today. So let's see how it stacks up. I proudly present D&D build number 188. It's a bit of a mashup of my old Critlander build and like my old Flamethrower, or maybe even Stealth Bomber. So like, let's call this the Critical Flamethrower. The Crit Bomber, the Noisy Cricket. Crit, crit, boom. The Spirit Sniper, the Flames of Wrath, the Dragon Bard. Big thanks to the D4 Discord users for all of the suggestions, as always, but I think my favorite one for this build has got to be Critty Critty Bang Bang. Yeah, that's a good one. Thanks to channel member Endless Dream for inspiring that one. And I hope the illusion isn't lost on the younger viewers out there. Big thanks to my good friend Randall Hampton for the fantastic artwork that he did for this build. He does this every week. And gosh, I feel like every one just gets better than the last, right? The perspective on this, the color, oof, that just looks so cool. If you'd be interested in following Randall on social media or to check out the other stuff that he's done, or maybe even potentially to reach out to see if you could commission him to create some art for your character or even your entire party, I'll put links in the video description, as always, on how to do so. And actually, we do not have an official sponsor for the video this week, which is kind of nice sometimes. So let's just jump right in to level 1. For our starting class, we are going to start off Sorcerer. And I'm going to be sticking with Sorcerer for most of the build, potentially the whole build. And yeah, I love Sorcerers so much. And I love them in 2024 more than ever. I argued in that same preview video with Chris that I thought Sorcerers were the strongest class in the game now. And I think I still feel that way. Their spell lists and number of prepared spells just got so much better. And meta magics almost all got buffed. Twin spell. And then they just got some really great and fun new toys on top of all of that. They are freaking fantastic. As for our species, I want to go with that good old species from the Monsters of the Multiverse book, or MOM, good old MOM, the Bugbear. You know, I think the Bugbear might be like almost a must-have species now for builds that are serious about trying to do big burst or nova damage. Obviously you could make a different choice, but they're just really solid. I mean, advantage on saves against Charmed is awesome. An extra 5-foot reach on melee attacks is nice if you're doing that. We won't be, really. Even free stealth proficiency and an ability to squeeze through tight spaces is great, but the real reason that we are here is, of course, for the surprise attack feature that Bugbears get, which tells us that when we hit a creature who hasn't taken a turn in combat yet with an attack roll, any attack roll, doesn't have to be a weapon, we can do an extra 2d6 of damage. That's kind of amazing, and we are going to get a whole lot of mileage out of it. It's so good. As for our background, this is going to be another build where I'm going to almost insist on either using an old background so we can customize it like it tells us we can in the player's handbook 2024, right? Or just taking a custom background, which gets discussed in the upcoming Dungeon Master's Guide. This is the only way for me to get both the origin feat and the ability score increases that I want. If you can't do either of those things at your table, then I guess I'd probably take guard or criminal background here for the feat. I really want the feat. And then I'd just be really annoyed that I can't pump charisma because, yeah, the free origin feat that we really want is alert, which as a Bugbear who does so much extra damage if we go before our enemy on round 1, it just feels pretty necessary to get on this build. Alert is awesome. It lets us add our proficiency bonus to our initiative rolls and lets us swap our initiative with a willing ally, just in case we still get a crappy roll, right? Here's hoping that your friends are willing to swap you out in those instances. I would for sure talk with them beforehand about your build and what you're trying to do so that they can hopefully play nice when need be. As for our starting ability scores, I assume we go the point buy method as always and say, let's get a 15 charisma and take a +2 there, a 15 dexterity and a +1, and then a 14 constitution. You could swap constitution and dexterity. It wouldn't be a terrible idea, but a higher dexterity would raise both our AC and our very important initiative. So I think it maybe gets priority here, especially since we have constitution saving throw proficiency as a sorcerer, right? And outside of our opening burst round of combat, we don't care maybe quite as much about holding on to our concentration as we otherwise might. At least the spreadsheet doesn't care that much. Not that we don't care at all, right? We still care, but I think I care about initiative initiative just a little bit more, personally. Do what you want. As for equipment, all we really need is a quarterstaff, honestly. We have no armor proficiency, we won't be getting any, and we actually are not even going to need any. So feel free to just stock up on your basic necessities, or save your money, or invest it in the Waterdeep stock market, or whatever. Sure, give it to your needy friends, I suppose. As a Sorcerer 1 though, we get innate sorcery, and I think this might just be my favorite new sorcerer ability for 2024. It tells us that twice per day we can use a bonus action to give ourselves advantage on all of our sorcerer spell attacks, and also raise our sorcerer spell save DC by 1 for 1 minute. It's like reckless attack, but for sorcerers. It's so awesome. Now, to be fair, a +1 DC to our save is nice, but not like overpowered. And advantage on sorcerer spell attacks is really good, but there aren't a ton of sorcerer spells that have us making attack rolls that I really care about all that much, with maybe one exception. And in that case, yeah, this is kind of awesome. It's a bit of a bummer that it takes a bonus action to use, especially since if we're trying to burst right on round 1, that would potentially reduce the burst damage we can do, but it'll still be great to have regardless. And it's not like you can't enjoy the benefits for the rest of the encounter too, you know, after your Nova round's done, right? We also get spells, of course, at Sorcerer 1, and there are so many that I would love to have. We're pretty limited on how many first level spells we can prepare at the moment, but that number increases fairly quickly, so don't worry too much. For cantrips here, I think I'd pick up the new Sorceress Burst spell. It's pretty fun. It does a D8 of all kinds of different damage types that we get to pick from: acid, cold, fire, lightning, poison, thunder, and even psychic. Nice. But then if we roll an 8 on the D8 of damage, we get to roll another D8 and add it to the damage, sort of like a crit, right? But the spell itself can actually crit too, since it's an attack roll that we could potentially be making with advantage, giving us a nice crit chance. And if we did, we'd have a greater chance to get at least one 8. Anyways, we can keep adding more dice if we roll more 8s, up to a number of dice equal to our spellcasting modifier. I don't know what the mathematical probability is of actually getting eventually 5 extra D8s on a casting of this, but I'm sure it is infinitesimally small. Regardless, it's still fun and cool and will occasionally lead to some like woohoo moments at the table, which is always great. The other cantrip I would be sure and grab here is True Strike. Finally, I'm using True Strike. Yeah, it's pretty great, letting us make a weapon attack, but using our spell casting modifier for the plus to hit and damage, and then it scales and does extra damage, you know, like at the same level that all cantrip scale, 5, 11, 17. For those of us who won't be getting extra attack, it's a really nice option since it would do the D8 of damage from our quarterstaff, right? It's versatile, so we could use 2 hands to attack with it, but also add our charisma modifier to the damage and, you know, the additional damage when we level up. By the way, you don't have to use a melee weapon to use True Strike, so feel free to grab like a light crossbow at character creation if you want for a ranged option too when you use this. As for first level spells, there are several that I'd love to have. Shield, of course, to use our reaction to raise our armor class by 5 for the rest of the round when we get hit. I'd consider mage armor for now, though we'd be dumping it once we got to level 3. Sleep is a really solid option, potentially incapacitating, and if they fail their save against it 2 rounds in a row, knocking enemies unconscious. I also really am pleased with the revamp on the Witch Bolt spell. You cast it, you do damage, and on subsequent turns only have to use your bonus action to continue doing a d12 of damage every single round. That round over round damage doesn't scale still, unfortunately, but since it's only a bonus action, it's a lot more appealing. Definitely planning on trying to build around this sometime in the near future. Maybe I should do it next week. It's gonna be Halloween. Call it a witch build? Maybe. No promises. But one thing I do promise is that I really love my channel members. I just need to give a quick shout out to my channel members. Thank you guys so much for all of your support. It means so much to me. If you're not a member, I'd love it if you'd consider joining. Click on a button down there that says join, and it'll tell you kind of the perks that you can get if you become a member, including things like access to the library of write-ups that I create for each of these builds to help you recreate it yourself a little more easily, access to the community Discord server where you can, among other things, help me name my builds sometimes, and access to the monthly live Q&A hangout sessions that we do. It's a lot of fun. I love that member community, but also if you can't or just don't want to become a member, that's totally fine. I appreciate you just being here, liking, watching, sharing, commenting, clicking on the notifications bell. These also really help support me, and so I'm grateful to you too for doing any and or all of those things. All right, at level 2, we still get Font of Magic, which gives us our sorcery points, right? 1 sorcery point per sorcerer level, and lets us convert those into spell slots, and vice versa. Though happily, it no longer requires a bonus action to sacrifice spell slots for sorcery points, which is really nice. If we really need them in a pinch, we can just have them if we've got a spell slot to cannibalize, right? But better yet, we get meta magic at level 2 now. Woo. We get 2 meta magic options now, and like I said, almost all of them have been buffed. There are seriously so many that I would love to have here, but I think the 2 most important ones, for burst damage purposes at least, are Quicken Spell and Subtle Spell. Quicken Spell hasn't really changed, still letting us cast a spell that normally takes an action as a bonus action instead for 2 points. But Subtle Spell, already one of the best options available, got stronger in that it now lets us cast a spell without using somatic, verbal, or material components unless the material component has a fixed cost. Meaning that for the vast majority of spells, we can cast them without anyone ever knowing we've done so until after the spell has already been cast. This is going to be pretty key to our burst damage strategy, but I'll talk more about it in a minute. At level 3, sorcerers get their subclass now, just like all classes, and I want to go with actually my favorite sorcerer subclass from the new player's handbook, Draconic Sorcery. I know, I love wild magic now too, but Draconic just got so much love. It's so good. Plus, dragons. And now a bugbear dragon. It's too good to pass up. Feel free to go with something else. Clockwork Sorcery probably has a better spell list, but it's actually a lot closer than it used to be. The subclass isn't going to have a huge impact on our burst damage, just a small one, but I'm here for more than damage. Anyways, let's read what Wizards of the Coast has to say about Draconic Sorcerers now. Breathe the magic of dragons. Your innate magic comes from the gift of a dragon. Perhaps an ancient dragon facing death bequeathed some of its magical power to you or an ancestor. You might have absorbed magic from a site infused with dragon's power. Or perhaps you handled a treasure taken from a dragon's hoard that was steeped in draconic power. Or you might have a dragon for an ancestor. I'd love to know how you got your draconic power, but as a draconic sorcerer, we get the vastly improved Draconic Resilience, which still gives us 1 extra hit point per sorcerer level, make me feeling slightly better for suggesting a 14 constitution, but amazingly, giving us not just a 13 AC plus our dex modifier when we're unarmored, no, we now get the best unarmored defense in game, letting our armor class be equal to 10 plus our dexterity modifier plus our charisma modifier. Come on. That is awesome. It would be like barbarians getting to add their strength to their unarmored defense instead of their constitution, right? Oh, except we get the shield spell. And like barbarians, but unlike monks, we can still use a shield and enjoy this benefit if we wanted to try and get shield proficiency. I'm not going to, actually, but taking like a cleric dip to pick it up wouldn't be a bad idea, I don't think. Make us more mad though, since we'd have to get our wisdom to 13, right? I wouldn't want to, grab shield proficiency with just a fighter dip, since I'm unwilling on this build to sacrifice even a single level into anything other than a full spellcaster. Our burst damage is too dependent on having the highest level spell slots possible, so full casters only. We could take a feat, I guess, to get shield proficiency if we really wanted to. And that wouldn't be a horrible idea, but it would be expensive. Anyways, we get 2nd level sorcerer spells here too, right? And Draconic Sorcerers actually get some additional free spells now. That's so awesome. At this level, they are Alter Self, Chromatic Orb, Command, and Dragon's Breath, all for free. Situationally, pretty decent. In addition to those, I want to highlight 2 that are very important for this build. Hold Person and, yes, Scorching Ray. As for Hold Person, you cast it as an action, it requires concentration, and if the humanoid you cast it on has to be a humanoid until we get the better Hold Monster later, if they fail their wisdom save against the spell, then they are paralyzed. And for those who don't know, paralyzed is probably the worst condition that you can inflict on an enemy other than unconscious or dead. When you're paralyzed, you are incapacitated, meaning no actions, bonus actions, reactions, you auto-fail strength and dexterity saves, all attacks against you have advantage, and best of all, any attacker that hits you from within 5 feet automatically crits. That's right, it doesn't have to be a melee attack, it just has to be made from within 5 feet. You see where I'm going with this, don't you? Okay, good. Let's keep going for now. The other spell, Scorching Ray, is incredible in the right situation. It's one of, if not the best spells in the game for those wanting to make spell attacks, and lots of them. It fires 3 rays of fire that can be directed at the same target or different ones, and each do a 2d6 of damage if they hit. And unique among spells, when you upcast it, the rays don't do more damage, they just fire more often, right? This is going to be a really big deal for our bugbear selves. Now, one potential problem for us is that the rays are specifically ranged attacks, but if we want to enjoy that automatic critical by attacking the enemy from within 5 feet if they're paralyzed, right, we would typically have disadvantage on those attacks. This is why at level 4, when we get our first general feat, we are going to be taking Spell Sniper. Spell Sniper was kind of decent in 2014, depending on the build, a little bit niche. It got a lot of love in 2024. First of all, it's a half feat now, like all general feats, meaning we can bump our charisma to 18, sweet. It still ignores half and 3/4 cover on spell attacks we make, which is situationally really nice, especially if you play at a table that uses cover a lot. It extends the range of attack spells by 60 feet, so long as the range is at least 10 feet to begin with, making our Scorching Ray go from 120 to 180, really nice. But then, best of all, for us, it now says that being within 5 feet of an enemy does not impose disadvantage on your attack rolls with spells. And so, we now have all of the pieces in place for our big Nova damage. I'll go over it in detail when we get to the first damage report in just a minute. At level 5, sorcerers now get a new feature called Sorceress Restoration, which lets us recover spent sorcery points equal to half our sorcerer level, rounded down, so 2 for now, when we finish a short rest. Very much appreciated. More meta magic and or more spell slots, sweet. And then we get 3rd level sorcerer spells, and this is typically my favorite spell level, but for today I'm just gonna say, pick your favorites. Weird, right? Of course, there are a million I would love to have. Draconic sorcerers get Fly and Fear for free. Super on point thematically and both fantastic spells. So yeah, other than that, grab Counterspell or Dispel Magic. You gotta have Fireball, right? Hypnotic Pattern and Slow are great control options in addition to Fear. Haste is a fantastic buff, but none of these are going to be used for our Nova round. At level 6, Draconic Sorcerers get Elemental Affinity here, where we simply pick an elemental damage type associated with dragons, Acid, Cold, Fire, Lightning, or Poison, as opposed to having to pick like a Draconic Ancestry like we did in 2014, right? And going forward, we just always have resistance to that damage type. So great. And when we cast a spell that deals damage of that type, we add our charisma modifier to 1 damage roll of that spell. We'll want to take fire here, of course, but not only for Scorching Ray, but because I think it's the damage type we're probably most likely to be hit with in most campaigns, most combat encounters. It's too bad that Scorching Ray doesn't work like, say, Magic Missile, in that for Magic Missile, you roll the damage die once, right, and apply that damage to every missile. That would be fantastic if Scorching Ray could do that. As is, it's a pretty minor bump. We're just going to get a bump to one of our rays, yeah? But it's not nothing. And it will make casting like Firebolt or Sorcerous Burst, remember we can choose the damage type on that, or Chromatic Orb, or even like Burning Hands or Dragon's Breath, a little better. And yeah, Fireball rolls damage once for all enemies, so that is going to feel a lot more powerful. Anyways, at level 6, it's time for our first damage report. So, let's discuss what I think combat will hopefully look like for us during our Nova round. First of all, you gotta find yourself a nice, juicy humanoid. So yes, I realize at this level at least, we're fairly limited in who we can target with this tactic, but that will change soon. And keep in mind that humanoids are more than just humans, right? Orcs, goblins, kobolds, Dragonborn. I think humanoids are the most common type of enemy currently in D&D 5e. Maybe not at your table, but still, most of us fight a ton of humanoids, especially kind of in the tier 1, tier 2 play, right? So I think especially at this level, you should be seeing more humanoids than just about anything in most campaigns. Anyways, the idea here is for us to use Subtle Spell to cast Hold Person on our target before combat begins. Once again, I appreciate that this isn't always an option. Sometimes you come around the corner, see bad guys, roll initiative, right? Sometimes they surprise you. But at least at the tables I've always played at, more often than not, there's a little moment before a fight breaks out where it's like, are we gonna fight, right? Maybe your table is just full of murder hobos and so you don't experience that. But most of the time, there might be a little banter, maybe a villain monologue, but maybe something more subtle where you're like trying to suss out motives or get information or simply posture a bit, right? This is a perfect opportunity for you to subtly throw out Hold Person, and even though it has a material component, thanks to the buff to Subtle Spell, you can now subtly cast this spell without anyone knowing. And just to be safe, I did a poll a couple of weeks ago to see at how many of your tables the DM would say, if you try and cast a spell on someone, even if it's subtle and they don't know you're casting it, you have to roll an initiative first to see when you can cast it, because that's going to start combat. Not surprisingly, I think only 3% of the over 10,000 respondents said that, yeah, at my table, I'd have to roll initiative before I could subtly cast the spell. So assuming you're one of the other 97%, if you can subtly cast it before combat begins, they fail their save, and now we're rolling initiative, right? So long as we get to go before our paralyzed enemy, thank goodness for the alert feat, we can run up to them, place our hand on their chest, and quicken spell a Scorching Ray at the 3rd level, firing 4 beams into them that do 2d6 for the spell, plus 2d6 more for surprise attack from Bugbear. Oh, except they're paralyzed, and we're making the attack from within 5 feet, so each of those is automatically a critical hit, meaning every single beam does 8d6 damage. Times 4 beams for 32d6. I'm gonna need all of your d6s, all of them. Now, why quicken spell? Well, because that means our action would be free so that we could cast a cantrip. Might as well pull out our staff and true strike them for what would be a d8 for the weapon plus 1d6 for the cantrip damage, which scaled at 5th level, right? Or actually 2d8 and 2d6 since it will be a critical hit. Oh, plus 4d6 more from surprise attack automatically critting on that attack too. Oh, and we add our charisma modifier to one of those Scorching Rays too as a fiery draconic sorcerer. Altogether then, if everything lands, we would be doing 38d6 plus 2d8 plus 8 damage, all on the first round of combat. And so, against an enemy with a 10 armor class, we would on average do 149 damage here during our Nova round, and against a 15 AC, it would be 132 damage. Holy crap. Did I just say that burst damage was nerfed in 2024? I really got to start writing those preambles before I actually crunch the numbers. Okay, so yeah, compared to the one other burst damage build that I've done for 2024 to date, the Assassin Rogue, right? That's like triple what the Assassin Rogue was doing. Now, to be fair, that build could do that level of damage once every combat and had a lot better sustained damage too, whereas this is something that we could probably only do once per day, and it has to be against a humanoid, and they have to fail their save against hold person, right? So yeah, a big grain of salt, or a few grains of salt, right? But still, this is more damage at level 6 than any build I have ever done, with one exception, the Echo Knight Fighter from a few months ago. And yeah, it's a lot of damage, but it's not a guarantee. So what does damage look like if we can't get hold person off before the fight starts, or if they succeed on their saving throw against it? In that case, we would simply use our bonus action to get innate sorcery going so that we still have advantage on the attacks regardless, and cast Scorching Ray at the 3rd level, doing 4d6 per ray thanks to Bugbear, plus 4 to one of them, for a total of 65 damage versus a 10 armor class and 59 versus a 15. Much more down to earth. Okay, but in that case, shouldn't we be quickening Scorching Ray and using our action to true strike still? Depends on the enemy AC, but having advantage outweighs the extra damage from True Strike once we hit an enemy AC of 14 or higher. So most of the time, go with Innate Sorcery. And sure, if you could get Innate Sorcery off before combat begins, go for it. But I have a feeling that most DMs would call for you to roll initiative if you said you wanted to use Innate Sorcery while someone else was monologuing, right? I could be wrong. There's no verbal or somatic components to starting Innate Sorcery, at least not that we see in the rules, so I don't know. Talk it over with your DM, maybe. Anyways, we're looking good, but how does it scale? Well, at level 7, we get another new sorcerer feature, Sorcery Incarnate, which lets us use innate sorcery even if we're out of our 2 daily uses of it, so long as we spend 2 sorcery points to do so. But maybe better yet, while it's active, you can now use up to 2 of your metamagic options on each spell you cast. That's potentially really interesting, but we have Subtle and Quicken spell. I don't see us needing to pair those up all that often. This does really make me wish we could get innate sorcery going subtly though before combat started, for sure. Having a +1 to the DC of our hold person in and of itself would be really nice, and then having the option to combine metamagics on spells thereafter, whether during our Nova round or otherwise, would be pretty cool, especially later when we get more metamagic options, right? We also get 4th level sorcerer spells here, and again, I'm gonna say PYF here, Dragon Sorcerers get Arcane Eye and Charm Monster for free, not bad. And beyond that, I'd be considering Banishment, Dimension Door, Polymorph, Wall of Flame, among others, but go ahead and grab the ones you like best. None of them are going to impact our Nova round. At level 8, we get another feat, and in the name of damage overall for our upcoming damage report, I'm gonna say let's bump our charisma to 20 here, but it is far from a no-brainer decision. Some of you may be wondering why we're not taking Warcaster. It's a good option, it really is, especially now that it's also a half feat, right? Not only for the concentration advantage, but also so that we can cast with our hands full. If I had shield proficiency, I would almost surely do this. But with just a quarterstaff, I can always have a hand free for casting when I need it, and I'm also not relying on concentration for Nova damage after round 1, like I mentioned earlier, so I'm a little less concerned about it when I build this character in the lab anyways, right? On paper. In game, of course, you'll often be concentrating on stuff other than hold person, and having advantage on those concentration checks would be really nice, as would being able to cast a spell as an opportunity attack, among other things, right? So sure, go for it. That said, we will potentially have a way to not worry so much about concentration in a couple of levels, so yeah. Okay, what about the Elemental Adept feat? With most of our damage coming from Scorching Ray, shouldn't we be worried about fire resistance? We absolutely should, and you should probably consider taking it to get around fire resistance, if not fire immunity, and even get a teeny weeny damage bump, as Elemental Adept would let us re-roll all of our 1s rolled for, in our case, fire damage to be considered as 2s. Why not just let us re-roll them? I don't know. But yeah, this feat is worth considering for sure. But the resistance problem is also something I'm planning on addressing in a couple of levels, so I think I might just max out that charisma after all. Again, at least for spreadsheet purposes, if it were me playing this in game, I think I'd be more likely to take Warcaster and then Elemental Adept to get my charisma to 20, even if it took a little bit longer. Anyways, at level 9, we get 5th level sorcerer spells, and Draconic sorcerers get the nice legend lore and very nice and thematic summon dragon for free. And while there are other fantastic options for us, Synaptic Static, Dominate Person, Telekinesis, Wall of Stone, the most important one for us here is, yes, Hold Monster. This actually got a little buff for 2024. It didn't used to work on Undead, now it works on everything. And it does the same thing as Hold Person, right? It just paralyzes enemies that fail their wisdom save. Regardless of whether they are humanoid or not, the only thing we care about is their wisdom saving throw. And that's just in time for our next damage report. Since last check, there are no real changes to our tactics, it's just that it's now going to work a lot more reliably, right? Thanks to Hold Monster. Unfortunately, we only have one 5th level spell slot to cast it with, meaning we can't cast it and upcast Scorching Ray as a 5th level spell. I mean, okay, fine, I guess we could technically. We could cast Hold Monster, then on round 1, use a bonus action to convert sorcery points to another 5th level spell slot, but doing so would cost us 7 sorcery points, all but 2 of our total. And we already used one for Subtle Spell, right? If we instead just quickened a 4th level Scorching Ray and then use True Strike, it would be almost the exact same amount of damage for way fewer sorcery points. So yeah, don't be silly. And sure, if you're up against a humanoid, feel free to just, cast Hold Person, right? And then you can let loose with a 5th level Scorching Ray, but I'm gonna assume that we are saving that for Hold Monster. The only other increase we've seen to our damage is that bump to our charisma, and so now, against enemies with a 10 armor class, we would do 180 damage on average, and against a 16 AC, it would be 164 during our Nova round, right on round 1. And I mean, okay, as a percentage of damage, that's not amazing scaling, but it's still a significant increase, and it's also a lot more likely to work now thanks to Hold Monster. But what if we aren't using Hold Monster? Well, again, we could just bonus action innate sorcery and then let fly with a 5th level Scorching Ray, and thanks to advantage and surprise attacks, it's still a very good 97 damage versus a 10 armor class and 90 versus a 16. By the way, I'm gonna put those like non-paralyzed numbers in the spreadsheet as well. For those who don't know, I link to spreadsheets and graphs in the video description of every video, just check the video description. So yeah, still really strong damage, but compared to old Nova damage builds, even the auto crit damage is less impressive than before. More like middle of tier 1 now instead of beating practically everything. But hey, that's still really good. And we are a full sorcerer with all of the delicious utility and support and AoE burst options that entails, so go us. At level 10, we get 2 more metamagic options, and this is really important for us. There are actually like 3 or 4 that I would love to have still, but perhaps the most important, I think, is Transmuted Spell. Transmuted Spell lets us spend 1 sorcery point to take a spell that does acid, cold, fire, lightning, poison, or thunder damage, and make it so that it instead does another one of those damage types. And this is why I don't think we really need Elemental Adept, because if we run into fire resistance, well, for a sorcery point, we can make it Ray of Acid or Ray of Thunder. What does a Ray of Thunder look like? Or something, right? And that's just kind of awesome. Now, sure, some monsters will have resistance to all of those damage types, in which case Elemental Adept still would have been nice. Plus, if we transmute the spell, we don't get to take advantage of the little damage bump from our Draconic Sorcerer Elemental Affinity ability, right? So there is still reason to consider Elemental Adept. But that feat does not get around the problem of fire damage immunity, like Transmuted Spell can typically do. So of the 2, I think I like Transmuted Spell better, especially since it can potentially take advantage of enemy vulnerabilities too, right? As for the second option, I'm really torn between Extend Spell and Heightened Spell. Extend Spell only costs 1 sorcery point. It lets us double the duration of our spells, meaning Hold Monster could last for 2 minutes instead of 1. That's not that special, but it now, in 2024, also lets us have advantage on concentration checks for that spell that we extended, and thus no real need for Warcaster, potentially, if we want to spend sorcery points for it. That's nice. Only problem is, now that we can potentially use 2 metamagic options on a spell thanks to Sorcery Incarnate, Heightened Spell would be amazing, because it says that for 2 sorcery points we can give disadvantage to an enemy on their save against the spell that we heighten. And yeah, with so much of our burst damage dependent on us landing that hold person or monster, this feels like it's maybe a little more important. If we can get our innate sorcery going subtly before we subtly cast hold monster, right? And that's not necessarily a guarantee, because don't forget, we have to have innate sorcery going if we want to use 2 metamagic options on the same spell. So yeah, sure. Again, if I were playing this character in game, I just might take Warcaster at level 8 to bump my charisma to 19, and then Elemental Adept with my next feat to bump it to 20. It slows down our charisma a little, but it's very arguably worth it. I mean, heck, if we didn't need Transmute Spell so badly, we could always take Twin Spell here too instead. I'd love to have that. I know it got nerfed, but there's one place that Twin Spell really kind of shines, and it's with spells like Hold Monster, which can affect additional creatures for every level we upcast it, right? Twin Spell now just essentially lets us upcast those kinds of spell by 1 spell level for free. Well, for the cost of sorcery points. And I mean, potentially paralyzing 2 enemies is, I mean, that's twice as good as 1, right? So sure, feel free to go that route if you want. Whew. Okay, at level 11, now that we've got those other metamagic options secured, I think I would at least consider multiclassing here. You don't have to. Staying sorcerer means lots of great things. Even more metamagic options for us eventually, more sorcery points, freaking flight as a Draconic Sorcerer, and probably most important of all, those sweet, sweet higher level sorcerer spells. So feel free to stay sorcerer here and you'll be totally fine. Arguably, you'd be even better off, right? Especially if you're going to take the character to level 18 or beyond, so that you get that Draconic Sorcerer capstone, Summon Dragon, which would let us cast Summon Dragon without using concentration. You could get yourself a nice murder of dragons that way. Will and I from D&D Shorts were actually chatting about that just this morning, and he's probably already got a short out about it, so go over and check out his channel to see that if you haven't seen it. Anyways, if we were really pursuing damage overall, I think there's something I'd like to add to what we've got going on here damage-wise. One important consideration, however, if we're going to multi-class, like I've said, we don't want to take levels in anything that's not a full caster, and that includes avoiding Warlock, since their spell slots don't play nice with ours. The best and most obvious option then, I think, is Bard, since they're the only other full caster who uses Charisma. So that is what I'm going to do here. I'm going to say that as our Draconic power has increased, so too has our thirst for knowledge about those ancient and powerful beings that we draw our power from, to the point that we've started to dedicate ourselves more seriously to the pursuit of lore about dragons. We want to learn everything we can about them and then share stories of what we've learned with the rest of the world. As a Bard 1, though, we get first off Bardic Inspiration, which says that charisma modifier times per day we can, with a bonus action, give a bardic inspiration die to an ally who can then use it sometime in the next hour, not 10 minutes anymore, hooray, to add to a failed d20 test, potentially turning that failure into a success. So useful for everybody all of the time. It's a d6 for now, but it scales with bard level. We also get first level bard spells here, and I'm gonna say focus on things that we couldn't get from sorcerer, right? So vicious mockery is always a fun cantrip to insult an enemy with, do a little damage, and also give disadvantage on their next attack. Healing word is always useful to give a nice little heal from range with a bonus action, and Tasha's hideous laughter is a standout here. Fantastic control, knocking an enemy prone and incapacitating them with uncontrollable laughter for 1 minute if they fail their wisdom save against it. They save again at the end of their turn and if they take damage, but you can upcast this to affect more creatures, meaning it would be a great option to twin if you went that route with meta magic. But then we do get 6th level spell slots here, multi-classing with a full caster like we're doing, right? So don't forget that. Oh, and also the true strike damage scales here, an extra 2d6 when we hit with it. At level 12, we would be a bard 2, and that means we get expertise, which lets us double our proficiency bonus in 2 skills that we are proficient in. Just pick your favorites here, but that's some really nice utility. And I mean, speaking of utility, we also get Jack of all trades here, which lets us add half of our proficiency bonus to skill checks that we aren't adding our proficiency bonus to already. Wunderbar. At level 13, we would be a bard 3, and that means we get our bard college, our subclass. And we, if you can tell by my little reason that I gave earlier for taking bard levels, are yes, going lore bard here. Let's read the new description for lore bards. Plumb the depths of magical knowledge. Bards of the College of Lore collect spells and secrets from diverse sources, such as scholarly tomes, mystical rites, and peasant tales. The college's members gather in libraries and universities to share their lore with one another. They also meet at festivals or affairs of state, where they can expose corruption, unravel lies, and poke fun at self-important figures of authority. I really like that little stick it to the man bit that they put at the end. So awesome. Okay, as a lore bard, we get 2 features. First, we get bonus proficiencies, 3 more skills that we get to take proficiency in. Pick your favorites. We're a real skill monkey by this point. And then we get cutting words, which is like an upgraded vicious mockery kind of. It lets us use a reaction and a bardic inspiration to reduce an enemy's ability check, attack, or damage roll. Alas, not a saving throw like in Baldur's Gate 3. Take a drink. We reduce it by our bardic inspiration die roll, right? And I mean, we can even wait in the case of an attack or an ability check until after the roll to decide if we want to try and turn a success into a failure, which is really nice. We then get 2nd level bard spells, and I'm going to say grab aid to increase 3 party members' max hit points and heal them, unless somebody else in your party is already doing this. Lesser restorations, a nice kind of minor cure-all. Maybe suggestion for some more strong single target control. And don't forget we get 7th level spell slots now thanks to our multi-classing. Okay, at level 13 it is time for our next damage report. Since last check, the biggest increase to our burst damage is just coming from upcasting Scorching Ray as a 7th level spell, if we really wanted to do that. We got a small bump from the True Strike damage increase as well, but we've also piled on boatloads of utility, support, debuffing, and control options, so that's cool. But against a 10 armor class here, we would, during our Nova round, do 270 damage, and against a 17 AC, it would be 247 damage. And that's a lot of damage, but compared to old Nova builds, it's actually slipped just a bit again at this level, landing us more kind of like in the bottom half of tier 1. Still really solid, but just not scaling quite as well as some of those older builds. If we weren't paralyzing anyone, the damage would still be respectable, 128 and 118 respectively. Okay, still looking pretty good, so let's see if we can finish strong. At level 14, we would be a Bard 4. And that means we get another feat. And I mean, if you bumped Charisma last time, I think I might take Resilient Wisdom here to bump Wisdom and give us proficiency in Wisdom saving throws, which seems like something that becomes increasingly important as we get into endgame to avoid those fear charm and like other mind control effects, right? But I suppose if we're really truly pursuing damage overall, sure, we could still take Elemental Adept here and just use it to increase wisdom instead of charisma, I guess. That would give us a teeny tiny damage increase, right? Since it would mean the 1s from fire damage are now 2s. Yeah, and yeah, it could potentially help us against resistance and still let our damage stay strong. I do think if it's me in game, I take this or Warcaster last time and then the other one that I didn't take then now. And then that would get my charisma to 20 finally. Okay, at level 15, we would be a Bard 5. This is my favorite Bard level. We get Font of Inspiration, which resets our Bardic inspirations on a short rest instead of a long one now. So many more cutting words and inspiring ballads and stories. And those inspirations are a D8 now, so they're more effective than ever. And we get 3rd level Bard spells. I'm looking at Lehman's Tiny Hut for a much safer rest opportunity, Mass Healing Word for a group heal if you really need it. Plant Growth is a pretty devastating, massive, slow option in a huge area in the right situation, can be really great. But yeah, pick your favorites. But at level 16, we would be a Bard 6, and as a Lore Bard, we get the main thing that we took levels in Bard for in the first place, magical discoveries. This is basically extra magical secrets, but letting us get it a few levels earlier than most bards, right? So now we can choose 2 spells from the wizard, cleric, or druid spell lists that are level 3 or lower and take them as bard spells. Because, see, sorcerers don't get the Spirit Shroud spell. Weird, right? And I mean, if we're not going to be paralyzing our enemy, wouldn't it be nice to have a way to add a little more damage to all of those scorching rays that we'd be throwing out? I think it would be. Wait. We came 6 levels of Bard just so that we could add a little more damage to our Nova round when we're not paralyzing enemies? Yeah, kinda. I mean, I love all the other stuff that we got from Bard too, but those non-paralyzed numbers are looking a little sad. They're not super awesome Nova numbers. If we could find a way to bump them a little bit, I'd feel a lot better about the times when, for whatever reason, our main tactic of paralyzing our enemy before combat started didn't work. Maybe we think the enemy has a really high wisdom save, or maybe they've got legendary resistance, or maybe we tried to paralyze them and they succeeded on their saving throw, or maybe they surprised us, right? There's no banter or are we gonna fight moment before combat begins. Now, in those situations, of which there will be plenty, we could subtly cast Spirit Shroud on ourselves, and then on round 1, do our same tactic of running up, blasting the enemy, and if we upcast Spirit Shroud as a 7th level spell, at least, adding 3d8 more damage to every one of our attacks. It's not quite as good as getting auto crits, and it might require a higher spell slot too, but it's not a bad consolation prize if we're just looking for burst damage overall. As for the other spell we should take here with our magical discoveries, what do you think? Revivify? Spirit Guardians for some AoE sustained damage after our paralyzed targets are toast? Let me know what you think in the comments. But at level 17, we would be a Bard 7, and that means we get Counter Charm. This is way better than in 2014, letting us use our reaction to cause a party member, including ourselves, who failed a save against Charmed or Frightened to re-roll the save with advantage. That's pretty nice. And then we get 4th level Bard spells, but remember, as a Lore Bard, that means we could swap out one of our magical discovery spells here for a wizard, cleric, or druid spell of now 4th level or lower. That's new and awesome. I mean, you know what that means, right? Yeah, sure, we could take Conjure Minor Elementals here. Bad taste in my mouth. But I mean, let's be honest. If Conjure Minor Elementals is in play, like as written at your table with the crazy 2d8 more damage on every single hit for every level that you upcast it, and you can sleep at night using it this way, then you should have started Lore Bard from the get-go and gotten this spell right at level 7. Maybe with a Sorcerer dip for meta magic, or I mean, sure, you could go full Wizard or something, right? But yes. If we took Conjure Minor Elementals and we upcast it as a 9th level spell here, it would do an extra 12d8 damage on every single Scorching Ray. And that's just way more damage than like just having the spell auto crit on a paralyzed enemy. If we were to do that, cast Conjure Minor Elementals as a 9th level spell, and then cast Scorching Ray as an 8th level spell, then the Scorching Ray plus surprise attacks would do 36d6 plus 108d8 from Conjure Minor Elementals for 612 Nova damage. Oh, plus True Strike if we quickened Scorching Ray, so another 69. So 681 damage. I mean, imagine if we dipped Warlock for Eldritch Blast instead, right? It's just silly. I mean, Conjure Minor Elementals would let me do that much burst damage on the opening round, sure, but then continue adding that insane damage to all of my attacks until I lost concentration. Oof. How did this spell make it through playtest? Okay, Enough complaining about CME. I'm not going to assume that we're taking it here again, because if it's allowed at your table in its current form, like, we shouldn't be waiting until level 17 to get it, right? Go Lore Bard to 7, dip Warlock for Eldritch Blast and Invocations, dip Sorcerer for Meta Magic and Laugh, or maybe cry your way through every combat encounter. So let's just say here, pick your favorite 4th level Bard, Wizard, Cleric, or Druid spells. Or, sure, go back to Sorcerer and grab your favorite 6th level Sorcerer spell. Either way, I'm not going to be making any assumptions about increases to our damage from our spell selection. Speaking of, that brings us to our final damage report. Since last check, our main damage increase has again come in the form of an upcast to 9th level Scorching Ray here. I'm not suggesting that you spend your 9th level spell slot for Scorching Ray. We're just exploring what's possible, as always, right? True Strike also got another d6 of damage bump at level 17, which I forgot to mention. That's another 2d6 on a crit, right? And then we get a teeny weeny bump from Elemental Adept as well. And so, against an enemy with a 10 armor class, we would on average do 348 burst damage here. And against an 18 AC, it would be 318 damage on average. And compared to other Nova damage builds that I've done, that's still kind of bottom half of tier 1. Not a bad place to be. What about on a non-paralyzed enemy? I will assume that we are subtly casting Spirit Shroud to let us add, if we upcast it to the 9th level, 4d8 damage on every single hit, and then firing 9 Scorching Rays with an 8th level spell. Oof, that's an expensive way to do damage, but we'd be doing 332 damage and 306 respectively, right? So yeah, a lot more expensive spending an 8th level spell slot instead of a 5th for Hold Monster, right? Or even potentially 2nd for Hold Person. But it's kind of nice to know that we can get to almost the same level of damage if we really needed to, and paralyzing them just wasn't going to be an option. All right, let's break it on down with some final thoughts. The tier score for this build, if you take the damage that they do against every armor class we calculated for at each of the 4 damage reports and just averaged it all into one big number, we would end up with a 197, which would put us right in the middle of tier 1 compared to old Nova builds. So what does it all mean? Was I wrong? Maybe Nova damage isn't dead after all. I mean, sure, I'll admit, I was pleasantly surprised to see the numbers get as high as they did. I didn't expect it, honestly, as you could probably tell by my preamble. And this all works really nicely in 2024, thanks to the changes to Subtle Spell and Spell Sniper, mostly. That said, I still think that it is going to be less likely to get to these kind of numbers in 2024. I think there will be fewer ways to do it outside of like Bugbear plus lots of attacks, probably using Scorching Ray and or Eldritch Blast, or maybe via old subclasses like the Echo Knight and Action Surging, right? But I mean, hey, I'd love to be wrong, and I'll definitely continue to think about ways to build strong burst damage characters. But I also won't be surprised or frankly dismayed if, in fact, getting up into these kinds of numbers is less common than it used to be. For the reasons that I said at the beginning, reducing burst damage just might be a healthy thing for the game. Now, some of you might be complaining about me not using Conjure Minor Elementals. I mean, look at that old Stealth Bomber build. I don't have any cards left. This is what the thumbnail looks like. It was hitting a Nova round in the 600s at level 17. How can I say on one hand that Conjure Minor Elementals is overpowered and it should be nerfed, and on the other hand say that burst damage is dead and we're never going to see Nova builds like the old days, right? Use Conjure Minor Elementals and you're there. And yeah, that's true. But like I said, the real problem with Conjure Minor Elementals isn't so much the damage, it's the fact that you can add that crazy level of damage on every single attack, every single round. If it only lasted for one round, I might be okay with the damage as is. It would be a super expensive way to get burst damage, and you could build around it to do some astronomical numbers. But it's the fact that with the spell as written, you could do that, and then on the next round, you know, like Eldritch Blast or Scorching Ray for continued crazy insane numbers. That's where it gets problematic. I mean, look at the Bladesinger build that I did a couple of weeks ago, right? With Conjure Minor Elementals, it's putting out sustained damage numbers that outpace a lot of Nova builds. So yeah, problematic. As for this build, I think it's in a really good place. Whether you take Bard levels or not, it has some really solid burst damage capability and enjoys a lot of fun utility, control, debuffing, and even support options to boot. Everything you want out of a good blaster caster. So here's hoping that many of you get to have fun with it soon. But that's the build for the week. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you know how grateful I am for you. I love you guys. Thank you so much for all that you do for me and for this channel. I hope you have a fantastic day and a really great week. And if you don't, for whatever reason, I hope you'll hang in there. Difficult emotions don't last forever. I hope that you will do good and be kind, and that I see you again very soon. But until then, take care. Bye. I'm Popeye the Sailor Man. I live in a garbage can. Wait a second. I live in a garbage can? Those can't be the lyrics, right? I gotta look that up. Surely that's something that we just sang as kids. It's just supposed to go, I'm Popeye the Sailor Man, I'm Popeye the Sailor Man. I live in a garbage can, it's way better. I'm strong to the finish, cause I eats me spinach. I'm Popeye the Sailor Man. There's a hidden talent I have that you didn't know about, I bet. Did anybody else watch the initial like Dungeon Master's Guide reveal kind of video where Todd was interviewing people that were working on the DMG, Chris Perkins and others. At one point they broke out into song, singing that song, and I can't even remember why, but I was laughing pretty hard, and I was wishing that somebody was there to do the little toot toot on their hand whistle, because that's the most important part. Doop, 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 doop. Wah, 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 wah. Do you not recognize that you're... Oh boy. I was gonna screw up the camera. Oh, it's in my pocket. Stupid. Stop. Now I gotta turn the lights off so I can actually see the leveling bubble. Whew. Now I'm sweating. Okay. Sweating. The other reason that I was thinking about that song, though, is because when I put this shirt on this morning, my wife told me that I looked like a sailor. So it seemed like the right time to sing Popeye the Sailor Man. I don't know. I should be wearing this shirt when doing like some sort of pirate build. I kind of already did that, huh, with the rogue paladin. Anyways, I didn't even say ching when I winked. I'm getting better. I'm gonna need your D6. I'm gonna need your D6s. I'm gonna need all of your D6s. Ooh. All right.